Greetings, cosmic kinfolk. It is I, Izzo, the Dynamic Observer, and this is issue number 2 of Dynamic Observations. Looking to open hearts and minds, looking to traverse ideas, events, and conversations from the mundane to the divine and beyond. This episode of the Dynamic Observations will be focusing on the apocalypse. Now pause. I know the first thing that comes to mind is the end of the world, and that's the last thing people want to meditate on. But trust me, we're not focusing on doom and gloom this episode. For this, we're focusing on the apocalypse as it relates to time. Because naturally, people think of the end of a world when they hear the word, and endings are markers of time. So we'll also be talking about endings and some new beginnings, maybe. And we'll also be talking about how these concepts affect the meaning we make of life and the world around us. We'll be reviewing all of these ideas while reflecting on a lovely Netflix series called Carol and the End of the World. So here's the rundown with a few spoilers when we talk about Carol and the End of the World. It's a 10-episode miniseries that follows Carol Cole, a middle-aged woman living during a time when a mysterious planet, identified as Kepler, is coming towards planet Earth. And it's concluded that the two planets will collide and end all life on Earth in less than a year. Kepler's discovery inspires the people of the world to live out their wildest dreams, essentially. People are quitting their mundane jobs, traveling to dream destinations, whether it be the island or the mountains, you name it, or they're just dancing until the world ends. Literally, there's a rave almost every episode. Yet, Carol is an outlier of sorts. While Carol's mom, dad, and their caretaker/boyfriend and her sister go about their lives traveling and experiencing every desire they could have, Carol finds herself just seeking something a bit more tame, relatively speaking. In her search, she ends up finding some things about herself and how she spends her time alive on Earth. Which, that was one of the cute things about this series specifically. It's a mini-series, and it came out in 2023. And it's a bit on the whimsical side. So, like I said, not too much doom and gloom, but just really a nice, reflective, and funny series that takes you on an adventure and shares some pearls of wisdom, if you will. What I appreciated the most while watching Carol and the End of the World is, despite the scenario of where the world is about to experience impending doom, there wasn't a sense of the world being a violent hellscape like most apocalypse-centered narratives. although it wasn't perfect. Yes, there was chaos, but the chaos wasn't everyone turning to murder and pillaging and violence. The skies weren't on fire, and there weren't zombies or mushroom monsters or demons chasing people, right? Folks just quit working at their jobs and started partying and vacationing 24/7, as far as we could see. The military forces were there in place of a police force to maintain order, but most of the institutions that faded away were associated with jobs, cubicle jobs, if you will, and bills and other capitalist entities. There's even a point in the first episode where Carol receives a letter from the former head of a bank telling her that she doesn't need to worry about a debt because it's been wiped. And it's been wiped because of the world, the world's about to end in 7 months. So what is the point of holding a debt over anyone's head when money is completely meaningless? Mind you, he's in some tropical space, skinny dipping, which is a goal, I'll admit. Honestly, truly, I could see myself doing the same thing too. He makes sense. But I digress. Even in an earlier scene, Carol is trying to schedule a teeth cleaning with a dentist and gets his voicemail again, which tells me that even healthcare has kind of taken a back seat because, again, everyone has 7 months to enjoy life. Outside of an emergency, what reason do you have to keep a hospital or dentistry open? Who cares about your teeth falling out or getting a cavity when, again, 7 months, the whole world is going to collide with some mysterious planet that no one knows where it came from and they probably don't even have the time to figure out where it came from. It's mostly just hey, get in where you fit in. Now, while all of these things seem like somewhat of a bittersweet dream, for Carol, it's a somewhat awkward dream. Throughout the first episode, she seems lost and uncomfortable in this world where everyone is just free and enjoying themselves in this sea of spontaneity. Because Carol seems like the type of person that craves routine and stability, and she finds it in an office space known as the distraction. And in that space where Carol also finds friends in Donna and Luis and the other office workers and a sense of purpose. Right, it's an accounting department, literally in this abandoned corporate building, and the elevators still work, surprisingly. And it's funny because Carol comes across this woman on a train who's still wearing a pantsuit, and she follows them to this office. And it's, again, known as the distraction. They do all of the typical office work, filing paperwork, reports, financials, all these things, copies, scanning, admin work, all the stuff that people would deem incredibly mundane and boring. Carol finds and sees it as a paradise. Now, as I mentioned, the lightheartedness of the show, despite its premise, is what I appreciated the most. Again, it's nice to see a show that deals with the end of the world, an end of the world scenario that isn't extremely violent. Don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed shows like The Walking Dead or Last of Us, or things like that, but sometimes it's good it's a breath of fresh air, I'll say, to see something like Carol and the End of the World, where the focus is not people just being constantly threatened. Instead, people have a sense of, they have the time and the space to just That's honestly rare sometimes, especially in today's age. What I appreciated secondly was how the series illustrates the idea of of an apocalypse in its truest form. So like I mentioned, the people have the time to reflect, and this goes along with it because something that sometimes gets overlooked is the meaning of the word apocalypse. Right? Most times it's associated with death, destruction, and the end of the world, thanks to the Christian Bible's global influence. That's colonialism for you. But the word itself, apocalypsis, which is a Greek word, means revelation. Hence why the last book of the Bible is called Revelations. The book itself centers on a vision given to a prophet. John of Patmos, I believe is who it is. You're welcome to correct me if I'm wrong. But another word that can be synonymous with revelations is epiphany, or a sudden realization. Interestingly, both concepts can sometimes be connected to endings or death, right? So like, think of the prevalent belief that one's life flashes before their very eyes before they meet death. Somebody starts to think about all the choices that you made and all of the regrets that you had, or the realizations people gain after near-death experiences. How many people decide they want to change their life because they realize a lot of the things they did in the past were either a waste of time or it didn't feel as fulfilling. And like I said, no one wants to die with regrets. And so meeting death or this having that proximity to death can be a revelation. What are you really supposed to be doing? Hey, so it's not surprising when these concepts are illustrated in a series like Carol and the End of the World. And they were illustrated really well. And like I said, in a lighthearted way, but that still has some gravity to it. Like you get to see all of the characters and some of their backstories and what they've experienced. And it pulls the heartstrings. I'll say that. The most obvious theme of Carol and the End of the World is in the title, The End of the World, which is far from an easy subject to tackle because the end can sometimes conjure up a myriad of images. Sometimes it's a happy completion to a troublesome story, a sense of relief, or the sun shining in the sky after the horrible storm. And sometimes it's a bitter finale, two lovers parting ways or losing a loved one. With Carol's show, it was kind of a little bit of both. The end was a mixed bag of nonsense, joy, grief, and, like I said, epiphany. Because it's during this end that all of the characters are forced to reflect on some things, including how they spent their time while alive. Like I said before, Donna's episode was poignant in particular because, at least to me, because it focused on how she was a mother of 5 kids. She had to think about the time she spent working to support her kids and thus wasn't there for a lot of their childhood. This gets revealed during early Christmas celebration, and she notices there's a photo album made with all the kids and she's not in any of the photos. Now, let's pause for a second because this moment in the episode was inspiring in some ways. Not that it was a positive, but it inspired me to think about all of the people like Donna. People who work 2, maybe 3 jobs, work long hours, work every day to provide for their family. Because if they don't, then bills don't get paid. And if bills don't get paid, then access to necessities gets cut off. Water, electricity, food, shelter. All of these things require money in capitalism. And people like Donna know that well. So because they don't want to end up homeless, again, with 5 kids, or go without necessities, they work. And they work their hardest. The toss up is that the time they sacrificed working means they don't have time to share with their loved ones. And that story is so tragically common. Now, Donna's kids, they understood, and they loved her for the sacrifices she made. But it got me thinking about all of the ways our time gets consumed, whether for our own good or ill, and how we start to realize which is which when we take some time to reflect on it, if we ever have the time. Again, if you're working long hours or working 2 jobs just to pay the bills, when do you have the time to reflect on what those jobs are doing to you? Carol and her sister Elena have this moment during a camping trip when they have a heart-to-heart about the lives they lived, including regrets and desires. Elena is the more extroverted one and travels the world and records everything on her camera. A polar opposite to Carol on paper. But over the course of their interaction, there's also some similarities. So, like, in terms of similarities, right? Both of them have a very clear sense of what they want and aim to go towards it. The only thing is, Elena's desires can be deemed as more impressive, right? Like, again, Elena fits into what everyone else in the world is doing, or a majority of everyone else is doing, I should say. You know, traveling the world with each other, partying, communing in a way, communing over drinks and all the things that people wait to do for vacation or the weekend. She's doing them, right? And I get why those seem a little bit more attractive naturally. For Carol to then turn around and say she just wants to be in an office when the world's about to end in 7 months, I can understand people looking at that and thinking something's wrong. Like, of all the places you want to be in the workplace. But I look at it this way. Like I said, Carol is a character who enjoys routine, who enjoys stability. And quiet as it's kept, there's a reason why a lot of people like those cubicle jobs. They provide a sense of security. The check comes on a regular basis, and the people you meet, they're always usually the same people. It's the main place where you're spending, I would say a good chunk of your life, 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday. I think it speaks to a lot of people's desires that they won't admit. They like the office space. Everyone doesn't want, say, a job or something where they aren't sure where they're going to end up. And that's fair. It's fair that Elena... It's fair that Elena wants to go out and again, record and live an unorthodox life, but it's also fair that Carol wants to live something that maybe is a little considered mundane. She's nice looking at the Applebee's, the abandoned Applebee's that's a basic menu. Hey, it makes her happy. And that's the other thing about Carol and the End of the World and the whole show. Everybody's doing something that makes them happy. So it's just weird to just knock Carol's efforts to make herself happy. you know? And so, like this idea of people finding happiness in the face of, I guess you could say, the universal adversity, because death is one of those things that everyone has to experience, and it's not always the easiest experience, is another prevalent theme. And I guess you could say there's almost like a bittersweet aspect to it, because you decide to make yourself happy in the worst of circumstances. And it's strange how, at least to me, strange, but I understand why it happens, where people wait until the end to decide to do all the things that they wanted to do, as opposed to doing it in the moment. I guess people, I don't guess, I figure people either don't have time to think about it. Many would say that it's because people think they're going to live a long life, or which is somewhat true, but I think it's people taking time for granted. It's people thinking that, they can always push something off for later, or they don't have time to do it now, because if they do it now, they might be shirking some responsibility that's been put upon them, like making sure they pay a bill. So they have to go to work and things like that. A lot of people, like I said, live in Donna's situation. But there is the fact that the ending, or the scenario of the end of the world, this planet coming to people, and coming after them somehow forces people to really choose themselves and choose their own joy. I guess that makes you reflect on life itself and how you lived your life and who did you live it for. And that reflection, or that reflective theme, if you will, is demonstrated in the final episode, right? Where it shows like I said, the bittersweet quality of endings. Because another key aspect of endings is death, whether literal or metaphorical. Everything has an end. And again, death is the archetypal ending, right? Like, that's the inevitable ending we all must face. It's not a matter of if we're going to die. It's a matter of when. And we hope, or at least I hope, that I live a long and fulfilling life. Unfortunately, we only have control over the latter part. I can't determine how long I live. You can't determine either. If we could, a lot of people probably would be a little bit happier, but then maybe they wouldn't be. Because if you live long, how do we know we wouldn't be convinced to make our lives longer just so that we could work longer? Who knows? But unfortunately, we only have control over the latter part. I can't determine how long I live. And maybe it's also because I recently read the graphic novel adaptation of Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. But my mentality surrounding the end of the world as a moment and death as an ever more general concept has started to shift. The ending of the Parable of the Sower especially confirms it. For those who haven't read it, here's a slight spoiler. And I say slight because the book was published in 1993. So the book is pushing on 30 years. Wow, time flies. And that's even scarier when you think about how prescient it is. But I digress. The main group within the story, right? They make it to their destination. Their goal is to make it to this farmland that one of them knows about. And again, they end up making it. They have to traverse through, all of the dangers of this post-apocalyptic world. killer police, um, people who are just violence, just traversing a violent landscape, to say the least. And they end up making it to this place that they think is going to be their safe haven. It's not what they expect, though. The people that they thought were going to be there aren't there. The place is practically abandoned. And the world is still chaotic. So there's that. The ending, it's not a triumphant moment in the sense that they defeat the great evil figure or institution, or they end the empire, like Star Wars or something like that. But it is a triumph because the seed of community has been nurtured amongst the group. They've survived, and they're willing to continue surviving together with a new sense of hope. And when I first read it, I had to sit with it. Here it was, Butler had described this vicious world full of terrors, and the story followed the character Lauren surviving this world with this intense ability of hyper-empathy, to feel others' pain and pleasure. She's creating community amongst people who are also trying to survive. And all throughout, she's holding on to this vision of a religion that sees divinity in change and adaptability and community. Then I had my own epiphany of sorts. I see a connection between Lauren's earth seed, god of change, and death as the ultimate change, which fits especially with my experience as a tarot reader going on 9 years. It's been said by many a tarot reader, the death card doesn't always mean a literal death, but it does always mean an irreversible change. People don't come back the same from death. Whether it's the person who actually dies or the people left mourning the deceased. I also say this point as someone who recently had, would be 2 deaths now within a year in my family on both sides. So, yeah. Endings are common, and they are a matter of perspective. What's the end of the world for one person has probably occurred 3 times to another. And it especially applies when I'm thinking about these 2 relatives. They were elderly, but I'm thinking about all the life experiences that they had and their childhoods and their teenage years and what they grew up in and how that fits into the collective world history as well as the nation's history. And again, history is also one of those great ways to gain perspective. What people actually lived through. When I guess in most of the history classes I went in, I had a history professor, shout out to Dr. Gunther, Irene Gunther. She mentioned how most historians, if not all of them, love journal entries. They love photographs. They love things that are personal because they actually ground moments in history. What were people going through beyond just it being a date and a place and these names of these people? These were events that people experienced, events in life. So how did they experience that? How did they respond to that? How did they react to that? How did they feed into that? How did they resist it? Those are all the things that come to mind when you think of time and you think of people's lives, and also when you think of their deaths. The end. Yeah, I mean, sorry, it's a heavy subject, but it's like, additionally, there's another thing to the way to look at death. And I don't think some people would resist it, but like, additionally, sometimes the end of one world is the beginning of another, right? And sometimes in more mundane fashion, the end of the world is happening in the middle of the lifespan of another world. That last point is what surprised me when I finished reading Parable of the Sower and the episode in Carol and the End of the World. that focused on one of the office workers' death, basically him dying at the desk, or his body being, him dying at the desk and him being found at the desk. It illustrated this point as well. The worker was named David. And this episode was just really astounding because it's uncanny how prescient it was. Like, it predated the real life story of the woman who worked for Wells Fargo and had been dead at her desk for 4 days before anyone realized it. And that happened in 2024. Nevertheless, it was poignant in how it explored the downsides of this carefree world as well. And it also showed the remedy in Carol's push to give a memorial for David. It's one of the many acts of kindness that Carol and those around her enact that made me enjoy this show, because it had a realistic vision about humanity in the face of demise that wasn't just colored by despotism, but also includes the ways humans can be compassionate to each other. It's a starkly different narrative compared to a show like The Walking Dead or Last of Us. And maybe it's because the people of the whole world realize it's going to end at the same time. And sure, they panic, but then they come to a place of acceptance and move forward with, again, reclaiming their joy. And it's not just, it just gives a sense of like community, right? Like instead of people choosing to, take over the world and exhibit more violence upon each other, people just decided they're going to choose to relax and why hurt each other anymore? We're all going to get hurt at the same time. So, instead, hey, let's all have a party. Let's all enjoy good food. Let's all make out in the old Office Depot. That actually happens in the show, by the way. But this sense of like of choosing to commune versus conflict. It is a fascinating thing, and it was refreshing to see that. And it's not to say that shows like The Walking Dead and Last of Us don't also uphold community, or that, because they do, right? Like those shows feature people trying to maintain solid bonds and community and families in the face of, a cataclysm, right? Mushroom people are running around and you don't want to get attacked by them. So, you link with each other and you hold on to each other. With The Walking Dead, you don't want to get attacked by zombies, but you end up getting attacked by another human faction or other human people. And that's unfortunate as well. And even with like Parable of the Sower, in the end, they still live in the violent world, but the main theme in the book is that they survived because they chose community. Lauren, her power is that she's empathetic, that she has compassion, and she knows when to exercise it and when to maybe restrain it. And it's never always clear why she decides which one to do, but in the end, when she does exhibit compassion, it benefits them. The group of people that they end up becoming, the group ends up becoming so diverse, and they understand each other and they still, protect each other. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And I think it was just even more beautiful to see that in Carol in the End of the World, because it was more lighter. And I mean that like less heavy. Than the other three narratives. But I digress. Back to David in Carol in the End of the World. David's life ended, and it ended while the world was ending. And then there was also this sense that life seemed to go on while the world was ending. So there's these layers to that as well. Because while he was gone, he had a wife, but his wife, her version of enjoying the end of the world or going out with a bang was literally her being involved with, I think, 4 or 5 boyfriends. And David there's a sense that David wasn't even acknowledged, despite the fact that they were married, which is kind of sad. It's like, yes, she's enjoying her life, but there's also this sense that like, it gave it this other aspect to it. Because I think that's also why I see Carol and I understand Carol and all the other people who decided to work with the distraction. Because another aspect of it is a lot of the people who came didn't have the best relationships with those around them, right? Carol doesn't have the best relationship with her family, I guess you could say, because she sees that they're going out and they're enjoying life and they're exploring the world and partying, but that's not her vibe. Luis is, from what we can see, there's a small scene and it's a bit sad, but he doesn't have the best relationship with his family because he's not with his family. Donna seemed to be the only one who, her family, she actually enjoys a holiday with them, the early Christmas holiday. And I think that speaks to a lot of people at the distraction. A lot of them were people who were already isolated in the world, and they just seemed they didn't quite know where they fit in. And here in the distraction, they fit in. There's a sense of community here. And Carol, I think, elevates that sense of community and brings it to the forefront, right? Like, with all of this that's going on, kindness and community are the core tenets of the people bearing witness to this moment. And Carol is sort of a catalyst for that. Just finding your own community. And that's a tricky thing to do when you don't have the time to do it, or when your time gets eaten away at something else. Again, trying to survive capitalism, finding your tribe can be a challenge. But some people, that makes it easier. Maybe they find it in the clubs. Some people find it at the park. Some people find it with other dogs, fellow pet lovers and whatnot. And here it is, Carol and all the other people who worked at the distraction found it at the distraction, at the office. Hey. And that brings me back to another point that watching the show kind of brings to the forefront: death and time. Or at least, what do we do with the finite amount of time that we have in life? It forces us to ask this question. Like, what are you going to do with it? And throughout watching the series, I found myself asking the same questions about my own life. The closest real life experience I can think of that's similar to the end of the world that Carol and her cohorts are experiencing would be the pandemic, which is still happening, by the way, because COVID-19 is a virus that is still going around. We might have eradicated one strain of the flu virus, but COVID-19 has not been eradicated yet. Just putting that out there. But 2020 had similar apocalyptic tones, which I'm sure inspired the creators of this show that premiered in 2023. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was created to address the public's reaction. Because I think there's a swath of the population that did not realize the revelations presented to humanity when the pandemic was first recognized. And there's some who did, but like Carol, Donna, Lewis, and all the other people, they chose the distraction in a different form. I mean, don't get me wrong, I get the attraction the distraction provided as a space. Like I said, they found a sense of community. These were people who seemed like they were already isolated before the discovery of Kepler coming to Earth. And so now they found a place where they belonged in some way or form. It provides comfort, stability, routine, all of these things during a time when everything seems to be falling apart. And these things are attractive because they provide a sense of control against the one thing we cannot control, death, which again is still a part of life. I would say that the same thing for the people that were so anxious to return back to normal, with normal being a time when there wasn't a vicious respiratory virus that screwed up people's immune system, right? They chose to continue working. They chose to party. They chose to fight to get back to traveling and eating in restaurants without a mask, by the way. And anytime you brought up a mask, people reacted violently. I mean, it's sad, but it's true. People literally were getting shot just because they asked someone to wear a mask. They, a representative of a company, asked someone to put on a mask before entering the establishment. And it's like, why? Why react that way? And I firmly believe it's because COVID reminded people of their mortality in a way they weren't ready to face. And in a way, they're still not ready to face. And I don't know if they ever will be ready. But I can understand the longing for such a time. You know, it's parallel to people that wish we could go back to a time before bills, childhood. You know, we didn't have to pay bills, but bills still existed. And so even though we didn't perceive them, I do think I realized that, like, maybe it's good to go even back further, a time when people didn't rely on labor and have it extracted from you. Right? You know, because for the sake of survival, for the sake of surviving what we have, the reality that we still live in, it's unwise to cleave to the past to the point that we ignore it. COVID is here. It's still spreading. I think right now it's in the middle of a surge. So mask up and avoid crowds, and, you know, take your probiotics as well, just to help your gut health. You should take those anyways. Yeah. Like, even with Carol and her pseudo co-workers at the distraction, there's only so long they can be distracted from the impending end of life as they know it. The final episode illustrates this point, because this is the bittersweet part. When there's the HR lady, who I think, based off of, if I recall correctly, she used to pretty much be a prostitute before she joined, which, again, like I said, speaks to she was an isolated figure. She didn't know where else to go, and she found a place in the distraction. But again, I digress. Once again, I'm going to continue to digress. Hey, that's the show. Just a dynamic observation. Bing. But the HR lady commits to investigating why everyone in the office started randomly crying one day. And the investigation brings her to a solemn conclusion. The end is nigh, and so are all of the friendships, all of the adventures, all of the loves. They're going to face that end as well. And it's scary, it's sad, it's angering, but it can also be relieving. Such complexities come with life as well as death, and they come with us reflecting on both where we fit in between the two. On a personal note, the themes of the show hit so deeply because I've hit one of many crossroads. I'm knee deep in my 30s, gonna be 34 this year in December. September 1st marks the 9th year that I've moved from Houston to Atlanta. I've gone through my own challenges and transformations, but even now I find myself having an existential crisis every other month, especially given the current political climate globally. So I pose these questions to myself and to you all as well. Are you satisfied with life so far? Why or why not? Are you satisfied with who you are? Why or why not? What would you do if you only had 6 months left to live? These questions may be far from easy to answer, but sometimes we don't need the answer. We just need the question to get us going, to get the wheels turning in our imaginations and in our minds and consciousness, to get us to explore and imagine and reflect and maybe even argue. Hey, because like Carol says in the show, sometimes it's okay to let things be lost for a while. So let's at least get lost in finding ways to a fulfilling life and deeper understanding of our reality and this thing called the human condition. Here's a quick post-edit note, if you will. When I was conceiving this particular episode of Dynamic Observations, this was before I had heard the news about the rapture talk, if you will, the event that happened, or I guess the trend on TikTok where you had evangelical Christians believing that the rapture was going to happen on Tuesday. What was the date? This past Tuesday, September 30th. Or wait, no, it was supposed to happen September 23rd. One of those days. Either way, it didn't happen. And so I just thought it was really interesting that here it is. I'm talking about the apocalypse as it relates to human society. And here we are. There were people thinking the apocalypse was about to happen and that we were all going to get left behind. Yeah, so life is funny. That's all. Thanks. But those are my thoughts. And again, I hope you all take the questions. You're welcome to answer them in the comments. If you like this type of content, or if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button, hit subscribe for more. And yeah, share the video with your friends and family and all the other people on social media. Maybe even your enemies too. Yeah, friends, family, and foes. Share it all around. Yeah, and then also, if you have any topics you want to suggest, go ahead and drop them in the comments as well. And that's it. So be sure to know thyself and be blessed. Ashe, amen. Hiya.